In Bridgerton, Benedict is often framed as the carefree brother, the one who drinks too much, flirts too freely, and never seems to take anything too seriously. But across all 4 seasons, his story has always been about something much deeper. It's about identity, about questioning society, and most importantly, it's about his journey as an artist. From the beginning, Benedict occupies an in-between space. He is not the heir like Anthony, yet he is still bound by the expectations of the ton. He has privilege, but he is also confined by it. Because of that, much of Benedict's story is shaped by a search for something that feels wholly his own, and that happens to be art. Across the series, Benedict's relationship with art reflects his struggle to define himself, to balance privilege with authenticity, and to pursue passion rather than simply fulfill the role expected of him as a Bridgerton spare. His artistic journey moves through several stages: rebellion, doubt, avoidance, and finally, acceptance. And by the time his own season arrives, it is Sophie, someone who exists outside the rigid structures of society, who helps him reconcile the different parts of himself and become the artist he is meant to be. In this video, I'll be tracing Benedict's journey as an artist from seasons 1 through 4, and how his artistic life has always been tied to his rejection of conventional society. In season 1, Benedict is introduced as humorous and seemingly unburdened, but beneath that playful exterior lies a quiet discontent with the privilege, expectations, and rigid structures of his world. The show establishes this almost immediately. At the Bridgerton dinner with the Duke in episode 1, when Anthony suggests that an interloper from Bloomsbury may be Lady Whistledown, Benedict asks, "What would be so terrible about Bloomsbury? Is it that people actually work there for a living?" From one of his earliest scenes, Benedict is already questioning and challenging the class hierarchy he was born into, and looking beyond the narrow worldview of the ton. This questioning only deepens as the season goes on. Benedict drifts further and further from aristocratic convention by exploring the hidden corners of the art world. He frequents underground gatherings and engages with people who exist outside of aristocratic standards. His relationship with Madame Delacroix reflects this clearly. He shows little concern for the boundary of class difference when he begins a romance with her, and by the end of the season, he is even more outspoken, reminding Eloise not to judge Madame Delacroix by her station when she suspects her of being Whistledown. Season 1 establishes Benedict's instinctive resistance to the social boundaries of his world. A major through-line of the series is Benedict's bond with Eloise, especially in their reoccurring scenes on the Swingset. Benedict is one of the few people who allows Eloise to be fully herself, often whisking her away from unwanted suitors, parties, or their mother's tirades. Their conversations on the Swingset often serve as moments where both siblings step outside of the expectations placed upon them. In season 1, Benedict first enters that dynamic almost like a figure of authority, catching Eloise smoking. But instead of reprimanding her, he joins her in breaking the rules. He allows Eloise to smoke, he listens to her improper ideas, he even tells her that if she were Whistledown, she would have his full support and admiration. Benedict consistently supports acts of nonconformity because he recognizes the same resistance within himself. At the same time, he understands the risks of rebellion. When Eloise encourages Benedict to pursue what he wants, he points out that if someone like Whistledown were discovered, they would be strung up by society. So early on, Benedict is caught between the appeal of freedom and the cost of stepping too far outside the bounds of propriety. That tension defines his relationship to art in season 1. His hedonistic lifestyle offers him freedom to explore himself. Through art, Benedict can not only exist outside the rigid expectations placed on him, but mediate who he is outside of them. At this stage, art functions as both rebellion and reflection, a mirror through which Benedict begins to understand himself. Season 2 sees Benedict grow bolder as he more openly explores art. He becomes more openly defiant of social boundaries, not only visiting Mondrich's club when Anthony refuses to, but also toasting him on his hard work. At the academy, he lets Tessa, the model who is not permitted to participate in class, break the rules when he catches her painting, and he even agrees to pose for her. These moments show Benedict moving beyond private dissatisfaction with society and into open resistance. That shift becomes even clearer when he applies to the Royal Academy of Arts this season. When he's accepted, he announces with exuberance that he wants all of Mayfair to hear and bear witness to his talent. Benedict does not simply want to escape society anymore. He wants society to see him doing it. Compared with the caution and fear of judgment he expressed in season 1, this marks a real escalation. At first, the Academy seems to offer exactly what he has been searching for, but that confidence collapses when he discovers that Anthony secretly paid for his admission. Suddenly, Benedict no longer knows whether his place was earned, and he begins to see himself as an imposter. This becomes a pivotal turning point in his artistic journey. His art has always been tied to authenticity, self-discovery, and freedom from the structures of the ton, but Anthony's interference extends the reach of aristocratic privilege into the very space Benedict comes to escape it. The distinction he had tried to maintain between art and high society collapses, and with it, so does his confidence. Earlier in the season, Benedict tells Anthony that when doubt arises, an artist should alter the palette rather than throw it aside. But when that doubt turns inward, Benedict does exactly what he once advised against. He abandons art altogether. This shows how deeply society's hold on him still runs, and that lingering fracture may also help explain why, by season 4, we learn that he has never finished a painting. Benedict's problem is not simply self-doubt, it is that art, which once gave him a place to question the world, becomes another place where he cannot escape questioning himself. The more he searches for certainty through art, the more elusive that certainty becomes. The season 2 swing scene adds another layer to Benedict's artistic sensibility. When Eloise asks him what he knows of heartbreak, he says that he can feel it in the skies of Turner and the portraits of Gainsborough, referring to the romantic painters J.M.W. Turner and Thomas Gainsborough. These two painters reflect different emotional registers, and together they mirror Benedict's inner conflict and heartbreak. In many Gainsborough portraits, the figures appear elegant and composed, but there is often an undercurrent of melancholy in their expressions. For Benedict, this can symbolize the underlying loneliness of social performance, of having to perform a role even when he feels uncertain about his identity or place in it. While the portraits depict restraint, Turner's skies are the opposite, intense, dramatic, and emotionally unrestrained, often filled with storms and dramatic light. In them, Benedict sees desires laid bare, the chaos, longing, and emotional force of wanting freedom and authenticity. Together, these artists reflect Benedict's own conflict about the life society has shaped for him and the more authentic life he longs to claim. This scene also reveals how Benedict's artistic sensibility allows him to recognize authenticity, and this matters because it helps explain why his connection with Sophie later feels so significant. In season 3, after leaving the academy, Benedict distances himself from art almost entirely. He slips into avoidance, distracting himself with responsibility and pleasure. At the start of the season, it is revealed that Benedict had been handling Viscount duties in Anthony's absence, and he admits that he enjoyed having a purpose. For a moment, this suggests that he may be trying to anchor himself in something more stable, but once relieved of that duty, he spends the season pursuing Lady Tilly Arnold and exploring his sexuality. At one point, when he's asked about his creative pursuits, he dismisses art altogether, saying that he only dances sometimes. Benedict does not simply step away from art in season 3, he downplays it. Rather than returning to art, Benedict fills his life with distractions, and when Tilly wants something more serious with him, he pulls away. He insists that being free has shown him how much he values that lifestyle and that he is not ready to give it up, directly contradicting his earlier claim that he enjoyed the sense of purpose that responsibility gave him. This shows that Benedict is still unable to remain within any conventional fixed role for long. The moment freedom begins to give way to stability or definition, he pulls back. And he does so because Benedict is hiding from the identity he once believed defined him, his role as an artist. The Swingset scene in season 3 follows this moment and brings this tension into focus. Benedict encourages Eloise to step outside society and travel, confessing that the more he learns, the more he realizes how little he knows, and posits that the next thing he learns should change him forever. In this moment, it becomes clear that his avoidance is not freedom at all. Beneath the distractions, he is still searching, still resisting the fixed roles society offers him, but not yet ready to reclaim the identity he once found in art. That is what makes season 3 an important bridge. It leaves Benedict suspended between rejection and return, setting the stage for Sophie to help him confront himself more honestly in season 4, as he returns to art and finally finds his footing as an artist. At the start of the season, we find him much as we left him, immersed in pleasure and distraction, still participating in the lifestyle he once insisted he could not give up. He tells his mother that he is charting a more venturesome course outside good society, but it is clear he has not figured out what that is just yet. But something changes when he meets Sophie. Sophie herself exists in a liminal space, neither fully a part of society nor entirely outside of it. This mirrors Benedict's own position as a Bridgerton spare. Their first interaction already reveals their shared proclivity for veering from societal norms. Benedict lies about being first on her dance card to trick Sophie's potential suitor, and she, for her part, plays along with the ruse to escape the gentleman. From the outset, their connection forms outside the rigid expectations of the ton, outside the ordinary script of a proper lady and gentleman. Because they both exist at the edges of the world around them, they recognize something in each other in this moment. And for Benedict, Sophie comes to represent authenticity. She knows what she wants, or in this case, what she doesn't want, and she pursues it without apology. We see this again later in her vehement refusal of Benedict's proposal to be his mistress. This is also what Benedict responds to in their terror embarrassed conversation. When he tells Sophie that he does not care for the other ladies, it is not merely that Sophie is unlike the other women of the ton, nor is it an insult to them. It is that Sophie exists entirely outside of the mold society tries to press women into. What Benedict recognizes in her is not just beauty or mystery, but a kind of integrity he rarely sees. Someone living in defiance of the same structures that have always made him feel confined. From here, Sophie invites Benedict to wade out with her in deeper waters, and Benedict admits that he prefers shallow water because it is warm and fuzzy. This exchange becomes symbolic of his larger arc this season. Benedict is still clinging, in part, to the comfort of social convention, while Sophie gently draws him towards something riskier but more honest. In that sense, the conversation foreshadows the journey they take together, as Sophie pulls Benedict away from the shallow waters of the ton and towards the deeper emotional truth that reconnects him with art. And when Benedict later meets Sophie as a maid, she once again mirrors the qualities he is drawn to. Just as she strayed from convention at the ball, she now stands up for herself and Hazel against Cavender's advances. In both worlds, whether disguised within society or exposed outside of it, Sophie remains fundamentally the same: outspoken, self-possessed, and unwilling to submit to the roles imposed on her. The season 4 swing scene comes early on, and it's especially important because it reveals a shift in how Benedict sees himself. When he asks Eloise whether she has been displeased with him, the exchange is light on the surface, but it carries emotional weight. She tells him that he's been cast out of their little club because he wanted to marry the lady in silver, and Benedict responds by shaking his head and saying that no one should be with him. In that moment, he seems to reject the version of himself that he has long hidden behind, the free spirit who belongs nowhere and answers to no one. Here, the freedom Benedict has long romanticized begins to reveal its cost. It no longer feels exciting or expansive, it feels lonely. This marks an important turning point in his journey because Benedict begins to see that detachment is not the same thing as authenticity. He has spent years avoiding definition, commitment, and vulnerability in the name of freedom. But here, that freedom begins to feel hollow. The scene suggests that Benedict no longer wants to remain endlessly unmoored. Instead, he is beginning to realize that being true to himself may require allowing himself to be known and changed. Inspired first by the lady in silver and then more deeply by Sophie herself, art begins to return to Benedict's life. As he grows closer to her, we see him articulate himself through art in ways he cannot through words alone. At the cottage in episode 3, we see Benedict physically surrounded by his art in a way we never quite have before. In his study, which notably exists in a space outside of London, away from the pressures that usually define him, that setting matters. It suggests that Benedict's art can only fully re-emerge when he is removed from the structures that he questions. When Sophie asks about the portraits, Benedict refers to art dismissively, saying that it was a passion. But Sophie does something no one else really has done before. She actually sees the work. She recognizes that his style is unrestrained yet full of feeling, and Benedict admits that that was exactly his intention. And when Benedict refuses to call himself an artist, Sophie shares a story of Michelangelo destroying work he deemed inferior to remind him that doubt is not the absence of artistry, but a part of it. In this, Sophie helps Benedict begin reclaiming what it means to be an artist. Mrs. Crabtree's warning deepens its idea when she tells Benedict, "Do not let her be like one of those projects in your study, something you are passionate about today but forget about tomorrow." The line is not just about Sophie. It also forces Benedict to confront the pattern of incompletion that has defined his art and his life. But significantly, by this point in the episode, we have already seen him repair the kite that he meant to mend years ago for Sophie. It's a small act that quietly signals change. And in the very next scene, we see him behind the easel for the first time all season, painting the lady in silver. Sophie is no longer just inspiring feeling in him, she is directly tied to his return to artistic practice. Back in London, as Benedict sorts through his feelings for Sophie, art becomes a record of his inner conflict. After speaking with his mother about continuing the search for the lady in silver, he is left alone to gaze at the unfinished portrait of her. The image is deeply symbolic. Benedict is still clinging to the version of love that would be socially acceptable, even though his deeper attachment is growing with Sophie. The unfinished face reflects that division. He cannot complete the portrait because he cannot yet bridge what society expects of him with what he actually wants. In that sense, the portrait is not just about Sophie's hidden identity, it's about Benedict's unresolved one. We see this pattern continue whenever Benedict feels unsettled or constrained. Like his conversation with Anthony, he returns to art after difficult conversations, looking to it for answers. So when he later draws the cottage and presents it to Sophie, relabeled from my cottage to our cottage as a part of his proposition, the image becomes more than a sketch. It becomes another form of communication. Through art, he communicates the desire, hope, and intimacy in a form that feels truer than speech alone. alone. This moment is significant because it's also when Benedict comes out to Sophie. He allows her to see a part of himself that does not fit neatly within society's rules, and she meets his honesty with acceptance rather than judgment, reinforcing why Sophie, more than anyone else, becomes a space of safety and recognition for him. At the climax of the story, we even see Benedict find answers in his art. When he realizes that Sophie and the lady in silver are the same person, it is through his drawings, by matching the pendant in his hand to the one he sketched, rather than through simple recollection. In this way, art returns not just as a passion, but as an emotional language, a place to meditate, seek, and find answers. The visual symbolism of Benedict's journey also shifts throughout the season, through the contrast between light and darkness. In earlier environments, the art academy, clubs, and parties, Benedict is often surrounded by darkness. Dim rooms, blurred surroundings, and chaotic energy reflect the uncertainty of his identity. For a long time, these shadowy spaces seemed to suit him. They gave him room to explore, to rebel, but that changes in season 4. In the first few episodes, these dark spaces no longer offer Benedict the same freedom they once did. At the party in episode 2, he seems dejected rather than energized, and at Cavender's party, there is a similar sense of detachment. The environments that once represented possibility and experimentation no longer feel inspiring to him. Instead, they suggest that Benedict has lost touch with the version of himself that once found meaning there, including his connection to art. But with Sophie, the imagery begins to change. Their most meaningful moments are increasingly associated with light and openness. Even their first meeting gestures towards this contrast. The ballroom scene draws attention to the chandelier Sophie gazes up at, filling the scene with illumination, while their costumes subtly echo the contrast between dark and light. This pattern continues in the cottage. Filled with daylight and removed from the tun, it becomes the space where Benedict begins to reconnect with himself. In his study, in the lake, and that detail matters. When Benedict still thinks of Sophie primarily as the lady in silver, someone who appears to belong within society's fantasy, he remains disconnected from his art, and he still moves through those darker environments without real fulfillment. But once he comes to know Sophie as herself, outside the fantasy and in the bright atmosphere of the cottage, something shifts. As he falls for the real Sophie, he becomes more attuned to himself, and that includes his return to art. It is after meeting Sophie as a maid, not as the lady in silver, that we see him back behind an easel. The shift from dark to light is apparent even within the cottage scenes. When Sophie first looks at Benedict's paintings, the scene is dimmer, reflecting his hesitance and distance from art. But when he later returns to the easel, the room is brighter, visually marking his shift from concealment to creation. The visual movement towards light mirrors this emotional shift. The closer Benedict gets to authenticity, the farther he moves from the darkness that once defined his search. Even their final dance takes place in a bright, open ballroom, which is a visual contrast to the earlier dance on the dark terrace. Their story quite literally moves from darkness to light. By the close of the season, Benedict is no longer content to live in half measures, through temporary pleasures, unfinished art, or fantasies that he never fully claims. Through Sophie, he is forced to confront the gap between the life he performs and the life he actually wants, and in doing so, he begins to reconcile the scattered parts of himself, bringing his emotional growth and artistic journey into alignment. In the final snapshot of the season, we see that Benedict has finally finished a painting, the one of the lady in silver. Throughout the series, his unfinished artwork reflected his unresolved struggle with identity, self-worth, and expectation. His inability to finish a painting was never just about art. It reflected his inability to fully settle into himself. Benedict could explore, question, and experiment, but finishing something meant claiming it, allowing it to be seen. What changes by the end of season 4 is not that Benedict suddenly begins defying society. He has always done that. What changes is that he is finally prepared to reject its demands more fully. Earlier, he resisted society in pieces, through temporary acts of rebellion. But in choosing to propose to Sophie, even when he believes there is no hope for acceptance, he makes a choice that is serious and lasting. He is no longer merely escaping society's expectations. He is prepared to build a life entirely beyond them. And in doing so, he also lets go of the idea that he must be perfect in love, in society, or in art. This connects back to season 2, when Benedict abandoned the academy because doubt made him feel he could not rightfully call himself an artist. Back then, imperfection felt disqualifying, but by the end of the season, by choosing Sophie, he has learned something different. Authenticity matters more than perfection. That is why he is finally able to finish his work. And just as importantly, he no longer hides it. For the first time, his painting is displayed, hung on the wall rather than tucked away or left unfinished. The finished painting is not just proof that he has returned to art, it is proof that he's finally willing to be seen and recognized as an artist. Benedict's journey was never just about becoming an artist. His relationship with art has always reflected something deeper. His struggle with identity, his resistance to society, and his search for a life that feels truly his own. Art becomes a place where he can test limits placed on him, question the role assigned to him, and reach towards another version of himself. But for much of the series, that process remains unfinished, just like his paintings. What Sophie gives Benedict is not just love, but the courage to stop circling the same questions and start living his truth. Through her, he is drawn out of avoidance, out of performance, toward a life that he is willing to claim. By the end of the story, Benedict no longer hides behind humor or the illusion of freedom. He embraces both his art and his love openly. And in doing so, he finally steps fully into the identity that he has been searching for all along. Not just a free spirit, but an artist. That's all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching, and make sure to subscribe and comment below what you thought of Benedict's artistic journey.